Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Hey, guys.
Paul, how are you?
Excellent. Yourself, Brian?
I cannot complain. Cannot complain. Now, I have to ask this, and we've already asked this question, but is this your very first live stream?
Never done this before, so I'm
Wow.
brand new here. You guys have to go gentle with me here. Break me in easy.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be hard or easy or hard. Nope, that won't be hard. Never mind.
Yeah.
It's going to be easy to talk to you, man. You got a lot of good stuff out there to talk about, so
Oh yeah,
it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Well, we all like talking about bees, so
we do.
That's a real fun part of beekeeping.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah. I will say for everybody, if you're wondering, Greg is unable to be around internet. So he sends his apologies that he couldn't make the stream. We all know how that Starlink and all that kind of stuff goes. So, but he's okay. He just is unable to be around internet. So that's why Greg is not on. So, gosh, but before I guess we jump in and chat bees, I think now. I spoke to you briefly at the Hive Life that it was just basically a blur for me because I was only there for one day and just all the activity that was going on. It was just, basically a blur. But I thought that we would just introduce ourselves and then, if you want to give us a little 5-minute, background of you. And we can chat some bees. So, Bruce, do you want to start out?
Sure, Paul. I live down here. Excuse me. I live down here in Southeast Alabama, and I guess I am the only Southern beekeeper on the StreamTeam here, and I am I guess you call me a sideliner, a beekeeper who is obsessed with bees all the time. Even when I'm doing my real job, I'm thinking about bees and about this YouTube thing and how I can get better at everything I'm trying to do. And so I run between 100 and 150 colonies most of the time. And this year I might try to ramp it up just a little bit. My primary focus has been honey in the past, selling honey. Excuse me. I've got this little frog in my throat or something here, but I also send a few off to California for almonds. The last few years I've done that, just a very few. Like this year, there are 52 colonies out there. So I play and dabble in that a little bit. I have some good friends who invite me along for the ride. And so that's something I'm able to play around with a little bit. And this year I'm trying to kind of focus more on queens, kind of trying to improve my genetics, as well as maybe trying to sell a few nukes here or there. Just trying to get into the bee game a little bit more as far as creating and selling quality bees. And that's kind of where the direction I'm headed now. So that's kind of my emphasis. And the bottom line is I'm just obsessed with bees and I'm obsessed with sharing it with folks. And so that's one reason for the YouTube channel. And it's a lot of fun. I did have a chance to meet you and talk to you for a little while there at Hive Life. And it was a nice chat. And so this is awesome that you've agreed to join us tonight. I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. Nice to hear more about you there.
Yeah, and me, I'm the hobbyist. So of the three, I'm just the hobbyist. I started out. This will be my 7th season.
Good to interject there, Brian. Please don't say just like. I think hobby beekeepers kind of have it nailed sometimes.
Yeah. And
sorry to interject.
No, that's okay.
That's absolutely.
Okay. I keep myself busy with it though, and in all fairness, you'll probably see, like we have one here, Brian 23. I saw Brian 30. Everybody is kind of having this guessing game, as to the number of colonies that I'll have this year. I went into the winter with 11 colonies, so I tend to have single digits as far as colonies. Last year I had some success, and then overwintering I had some success. So I just more or less stay in that hobbyist kind of realm. And my job keeps me that way. I have a full-time job. I'm in Northeast Ohio, so a little bit south of Lake Erie. So that's why I stay grounded in the number where I'm at, just because if I expanded, even I say if I had 20 or 30 colonies, I couldn't properly manage them. And then Mother Nature's going to kick me right in the gut and take me back down to the number that I probably should have. So, but I'm just that hobbyist, but I'm like Bruce. I mean, I'm full gung ho about the bees, and I mean, we do these chats every week. So, Bruce and I are always looking at different analytics and this and that. And so, but yeah, that's a little bit on me. So,
Thanks, Brian. It's really interesting to hear your background and the fact that you guys have are working at different scale in very different regions. Must make the conversations you have interesting to people from all over the place. I'm always interested to learn how things work in other areas. You kind of figure out what works for you in your own location, but it's hard. It's sometimes hard to transfer that knowledge to beekeepers in other areas, because what we do here may not work elsewhere, but a lot of times what we do would work elsewhere, and you just kind of have to try those things out and see what works for you. But well, thanks very much. But I'll give you a bit about my background here. It's hard to just keep this to 5 minutes, guys, but I will do my best.
Take if you want,
take your time,
15. Yeah, take your time. But
I'm kidding. I won't go on too long.
This is your first live, so you've got the stage.
All right. My dad, I had a grade 6 science project to do, and my dad said, "Well, why don't you do it about bees?" And he took me down to a neighbor, good friend of his that he had grown up with. And he called him Honey Boy McLaughlin, even though he was in his 40s at the time. He was Honey Boy McLaughlin, and he kept 300 or 400 hives, drove a school bus, and ran a small commercial beekeeping operation. So, that fascinated me, his beekeeping, his lifestyle, and how he's making a living. But through the teen years and so on, I had other interests and moved into other things. But I always knew I wanted to work outside. Wasn't sure exactly what. Did some work in the backcountry in the Rocky Mountains, working on doing trail work, things like that. It was great work, not a career though. And then I went to university after a few years out of high school, and met a guy in a pub that was just graduating from their apiculture program here at the University of Guelph, and he was going to start his own commercial bee business, and he was going to focus on honey packaging. He ended up building that to £1 million a year over the next 5 years, and then had some other things go on that came crashing down too. So he went up quick and came down kind of quick too. But he was just so interesting to listen to hear about bees and hear about the business side of it and what the potentials were. So right then I knew, hey, this could be something for me. So I enrolled in the apiculture course, and sitting in those classes, I was just enthralled, and I knew, like, almost from day one, this is what I want to do. One thing I didn't have figured out though is I thought I could be a beekeeper, commercial beekeeper in the summer, maybe make a living with 100 beehives, ski all winter. It was a little bit of an idealistic view on what beekeeping as a career might be, but hey, it got me into it. So I worked in my first year in northern Alberta with a beekeeper with 3,000 hives. So
wow.
I like to say we did everything 3,000 times. So you get kind of used to finding queens and doing other things like that. Second year of beekeeping, and this is while I was going to university. Second year of beekeeping, I moved to southern British Columbia and worked for a beekeeper that had just bought 300 beehives. Didn't really know how to manage them. he figured since I had 1 year experience, I would knew everything about it. And
Oh
so
my.
he hired me. I learned a lot that way too, some of it at his expense. But, and then the next year, I moved out to Nova Scotia to work for a commercial beekeeper that did blueberry pollination as his main source of income, but also honey production. So I moved around a bit, trying to get different experience. Then traveled down to New Zealand. I wanted to get some queen rearing experience there. So I traveled around on my bicycle and worked for beekeepers that were into queen rearing and gained some experience there. Came back home thinking I was going to start my own beekeeping business, had it all nailed, had it all figured out. And at that point, honey was selling for 37 cents a pound wholesale. Cost of production was 65 cents a pound. It was not a good time to get into beekeeping. A lot of beekeepers wanted to sell me their operations, but it was kind of a desperate time. A job came up here at the university. Applied for it, and with the varied experience that I had, and the fact that I had a university degree in apiculture, I was able to get the job. Figured it would just be for a couple of years. I'd move on to my own beekeeping business, and 37 years later, I'm still here. I do have 120 of my own hives, kind of, I have just so I have a little bit of my own thing going on there. And if I ever retire, I'm going to be a real commercial beekeeper. But when I retire, it's kind of an open question.
Yeah.
Right. That's
wow. That's wow. I mean, Bruce, I don't even know what to say for that. That's a heck of a.
That's an incredible resume, there, man. That's
yeah.
awesome. A lot of experience in different parts of the world, really. And so that's incredible.
Well, we have a student apiculture club here that's been going since 1890. So it's a long-standing club, and we keep it rolling along still. But I joined that club as a student, and the president of the club said, "Get into bees. You can travel and work bees anywhere you want." And both things really appealed to me, the travel and the beekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really true. You learn some bee skills, and there are jobs out there for people in many areas.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the University of Guelph? Is it a full-scale university, or what do they do there? Is it?
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. And thanks for pronouncing Guelph as Guelph. Like, that's a challenge. I found out down at Hive Life, people really struggle with how to say the word Guelph. So we started off here as an agricultural college and also a domestic institute. There are 3 different colleges. One, the domestic institute, remember this is the 1800s, was for textiles, nutrition, food, that sort of thing. That was all women. And then the agricultural college was all men. And then there's the vet college as well, which was also all men. Incidentally, the vet college now all women. There are almost no men in veterinary science now.
Wow.
So as it started as an agriculture college, bees were there right from the beginning, because at that time, farmers were mixed farmers. So they had, some pigs, some chickens, some sheep, probably a small orchard, and probably some bees to pollinate that orchard. There was no such thing as commercial beekeeping at that point, but I'd like to brag that the world's first commercial beekeeper was from Ontario. A guy named D.A. Jones. He ran 1,000 hives in the 1800s.
Wow.
He sold most of his honey in England. He did bee breeding on islands in Georgian Bay, and he ran a beekeeping supply business. He was the editor of the American Bee Journal, and I could go on and on. He was Mr. Bee. The name of his town, Bee Town. They named it after his activity. It's still called Bee Town.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
I was so earlier today, I was doing a little bit of a dive into your background in that, and I watched one of the videos about the breeding and you were out on one of the islands, and you were going through some of the little mini mating nukes, and we're talking about the buckfast line and different things like that, and that is just, it's fascinating to me, to have the ability to go out and really more or less hone in on those genetics, and keeping, I mean, on an island, really you can somewhat
Control.
really
Yeah.
control the genetics of the bees. And I was, Bruce, if you would have seen how calm the colonies were, the gentleman that was with you, he had his hand going over those colonies like this, and that's something, Paul, that if Bruce if Bruce were able to do that in his colonies, it would be a miracle. But I
Yeah,
was just,
mine are much more spicy than yours for sure.
yeah.
Well, I would imagine are in an area where there's Africanized bees. Is that right, Bruce?
As far as I know, there are no confirmed cases in Alabama, but they're in Florida. I think they're in all the states around us. And so,
Right.
but I think the feral genetics in this area are just a little bit spicy. Not all of them, of course. Most of my basic stock was founded upon, local stuff, catching swarms. And then I had my mentor, I think, well, I do know he bred queens, but I think he just kind of used local stock as well. I'm trying to introduce, that's one of my biggest goals right now with my operation, is to kind of tone things down a little bit. They're getting much better. Even since last year, I've made a real effort to try to tone the genetics down and just, continue to have hopefully good, strong bees, but not quite as,
Yeah.
not ankle staplers or whatever you want to call them. I don't want those, but they're getting better. And part of it is I've introduced some stock from Greg and some other beekeepers, and I'm trying to just figure the genetic thing out a little bit. But I don't know if you realize this, but I had Tom Nolan. I know he knows you, right? Tom,
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
Furniture guy. He came down a few weeks ago, and he was a little nervous about my bees because I don't know if he'd heard about him, but he talks about how he works his bees in shorts, and I think he wears a veil sometimes, and he said he knows you and how calm your bees are, and I've seen you working your bees and how calm they are, and so my bees would just start flying around a little bit, and he'd get a little bit like, oh my gosh, they're getting fired up or whatever. I'm like, no, this is not fired up.
Bruce, there's hope there for sure. Because when I first started working here, our bees were terrible, and that was just normal in Ontario. Nobody was doing any breeding work to speak of. We were entirely reliant on imports of bees from the southern U.S. to replace losses and to purchase queens. But beyond that, people just let their bees go. They superseded, they swarmed, they did whatever. And 35 years ago, there just wasn't a lot of knowledge there because we didn't need to have it. We didn't need to be self-sufficient. What really changed things for us here was Canada closed its border to imports of bees from the United States, and everybody had to start trying to figure it out. So we had to learn how to replace stock through making up nukes. Packaged bees weren't an option here. They don't kind of work in our area, or to produce them anyway. And we needed to learn how to raise queens. And then, of course, we needed to learn how to breed bees. So that was kind of the start of my career here, was right after the border closed. And so I was in this from the beginning with the whole education, and I was learning a lot along the way, of course, too. So, but our bees were terrible, getting back to that. And looking back now from where our bees are then to where they are now to where they then, it's almost like they're a different species. They were so different to work with. One of the biggest things we've found in our research as far as bee breeding is concerned, my boss, Dr. Nestor Guzman, is a fantastic bee researcher. He, working with Greg Hunt at Purdue, determined that defensiveness or lack thereof is largely inherited from the drones. So if you can control who your queens are mating with, and that they're mating with drones that come from gentle colonies, you can really improve your stock much more quickly. So, of course, isolated mating is a great way to do that. You establish drone colonies there that are the very best in terms of their gentle behavior, and then you make queens of them, and you know that gentleness will get passed on. Within a local area, as we get more and more of our own stock around and concentrate our own bees within areas, what we do is locally we do all our queen mating in our home yard, because our home yard is surrounded by other yards. Other beekeepers aren't in that area, not very much anyway. And we're able to flood this area with our own drones. We ruthlessly eliminate any colonies that show defensiveness. So those drones aren't out in the area. And that makes a big difference. I can see with some of my own hives, I'm working on concentrating a mating area to flood one area there, moving hives more into that area, focusing in one area, because I do notice that even with the same queens, I'll tell you a little secret here. I get some queens from work. But when those virgin queens go into my own beehives, if I don't have control over that mating, there's much more variability there.
So I guess the question I would have is how do you set it up? You say you have your mating stuff going on, and is it like a central location, and you strategically put other bee yards or apiaries in the area that produce the drones? You do that strategically. How far is the distance? What would you recommend if you're trying to fix that, as far as how far away would the drone creating producers be?
No, great question there. But to be honest, you kind of have to find places where you can keep bees too, right? So
sure,
it's not done with a ruler on a map or anything. But we do have 5 apiaries of approximately 30 colonies within a 5-kilometer range of our home yard, kind of surrounded there. Okay. So there's just not a lot of other drones out there than ours. Queens can mate very close to home. They can mate further away from home. There's kind of some variability there depending on the drones that are available. Because we keep a large number of colonies within that area, we don't do anything especially to raise more drones in the colonies. I feel that colonies raise the amount of drones that they're going to raise no matter what I do. So we just let them do their own thing in terms of drone production. We just make sure there's lots of good, healthy colonies out there, the right genetics, and lots of hives, so that bee breeding does, in a way, require quite a few hives. You've got to have the drones there. You need production hives for like producing queens, and when you're producing queens, more bees is always better. If you have 5 hives, you might not want to dedicate all 5 of them to raising queen bees. But if you have 200 hives, you can easily dedicate 10 or 15 hives only to queen production, not worry about the honey production out of those. And so you really, it's kind of costly to raise queens. And then when it comes to breeding, you want to have a large number of colonies to look at to be able to pick out the best. If you have 5 hives and you're picking the best one, that's nowhere near the same as picking the best one out of 500 hives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess in my situation, just trying to kind of introduce a better stock to this area, I would like to get into the queens a little bit more and producing. There's no one right here where I'm at that's doing that. And so, I've developed a fairly significant number of colonies. I'm going to hopefully get up to a few more, but there are people say the bees are going extinct, but in Southeast Alabama, That is not true. You know, you get swarm calls, bees in people's walls. It's just bees are all over the place down here.
Mm.
I think the environment just, you know, it is a fairly mild climate, and the bees do thrive here, even in the wild. And so, how I guess the idea is that you just have to figure out kind of a region or an area and just really try to get your colonies in that area and kind of have like a buffer zone, so to speak, so that your bees, the genetics that you desire, will flood that area and even affect the feral bees in the area to kind of make a better stock all the way around. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to. That's theoretically what I'm going to try to do a little bit. The farm where I grew up is located kind of centrally in an area where I think I could find bee yards within a half a mile to a mile, kind of all around it. You know, we know the neighbors and we know people that will allow me to put bees on the land. It may not be a perfect circle around or a perfect radius, but it would be, I could definitely get a lot of bees in that area. And so with my mom's farm, maybe being the central location for the mating yard is what I'm thinking. So I'm kind of trying to wrap my brain around that. I do have some other locations a little further out where I could maybe try and imitate that, but that's kind of where I'm thinking I want to do that. And so I guess that's what you'd recommend. Just kind of flood the area with the bees that you want. And then the thing that is difficult for me, and I think a lot of people, is just the concept of just murdering those queens. You know, I don't have a really hard time doing that with queens that are non-productive or weak. But if I've got a great big monster colony that's got first of all, I got to find the queen, and then to kill that queen or to try and eliminate that colony it just hurts me to do that. But I've got to be more specific about doing that. I know that's important. And the other question I had, just to kind of piggyback on that, is, do you notice a difference with your genetics? Like, are the calmer bees more susceptible to mites or diseases?
That's a great question, and I can't give you a really good answer on that, but we are doing a breeding project here that we call LVG. We're trying to brand it just like everybody else does, SMH and all the rest of it. So our LVG is short for low Varroa growth rate, and it's based on grooming research that we did, where we were testing colonies for their allo grooming behavior. So in other words, grooming mites off themselves. And to do that, we take a mite and we put it on a bee, and we put that, this is inside a petri dish, cover it up with saran wrap. So it's very, very technical. And we then have a counter in each hand, little plunger kind of counters, and we score the battle. So we look at the behavior of the bee in response to that mite. And we score how many legs do they get working away at trying to remove that mite, how vigorous they are in doing this. Pat did a little bit. Are they very vigorous? How long do they do this grooming behavior? Are they successful at getting the mite off their body? And we found there's quite a bit of variability from colony to colony, how well bees do at grooming. We then compared that with the growth rate of the mites, and we found a very good correlation between good grooming behavior and low Varroa growth rate. Now, to measure that Varroa growth rate, we count the mites in the spring, sticky paper, alcohol wash, whatever. We use sticky paper. And then we do the same test late in the summer, and we make sure the management's the same on these hives that we're comparing. The difference between the spring count and the late summer count is the growth. So we're able to get a numerical number for that growth rate, and then those bees are scored for that. So we then breed from the highest, which sounds crazy, like the highest mite growth rate, and then we breed from the lowest growth rate. And the reason we're going in two directions is to see how well our program works. So in the first two generations, we saw a good split there, and that what we're doing is working. We're now in our 5th generation, and as of this year, hallelujah, I no longer have to breed high growth rate Varroa colonies. I'm kind of tired of doing that. So I'm trying to get back to your question here, Bruce. The big thing is the growth rate, but we're also looking at grooming behavior, hygienic behavior, defensive behavior, and testing everything else we can, because we want to see what else correlates with this low Varroa growth rate. And unfortunately, there is a slight correlation with defensive behavior and low Varroa growth rate. I was very disappointed to see that because that's not what I want to be breeding towards. But it was so slight that we're not really sure if that's real or not. So I kind of have some hope that maybe it's not real. But we will be doing more work and looking into that. I think really the ultimate goal here is to we can't just breed for low Varroa growth rate. We have to continue to breed for bees that people want to work with. So we really have to be trying to do both. And this method that we've developed is not, it's not like we're trying to develop the ultimate bee here and sell it all over the world and have that control over that market or anything. We can't do that. What we're trying to do is encourage other people to emulate a really simple method of breeding towards resistance. In a way, it's a method of decoupling from the methods that we use where we treat mites every year, which we have to. But in doing so, we're not allowing bees to evolve in relation to the challenge that they have for mites because we're treating them. So this way we can breed for low Varroa growth rate and also treat our bees after we've done our selection, try to keep our bees alive and breed from the ones that are doing well.
It's interesting as I've talked to Corey Stevens and some other people, and now you about this Varroa situation. You know, Corey, they're looking at the SMR the VSH type stuff, the UBO, unhealthy brood odor type things, where the bees sense the mites in the brood, and they either cause the mite not to reproduce, or they just remove the larva. And so you're talking about a behavior where they actually get the mites off of the bees. And so if you could combine those somehow, man, that could just be an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of what everybody's kind of trying to take their own angle.
Yeah.
But I do think it kind of makes sense in a little bit of a respect that they would be a little bit more defensive because they're more alert to what's going on, on their bodies. And they're a little bit more, if the word is aggressive, they're aggressively trying to remove those mites. It makes a little more sense to me that they might be a little bit more that way. But I really think that part of the problem with some of my bees in the past is I've not been real good in past years with taking care of the mite situation, with treating for mites. I just kind of shot them, shot some oxalic acid in there a few times a year and thought that was the ticket, and then realized through testing that's okay during certain times of the year, but you got to be more strategic and intentional with how you do that. And so this past year, I really tried to focus in and test before and after treatments and try to figure out which treatments were really working and try different things. And I'm actually in the process of trying Formic Pro now. After Tom talked to me, we had an interview down here and we talked, and I got a little more, I ended up being a little bit less nervous about it. So it's on one colony now, and I plan to treat more later as long as the temperature stays where it needs to. But my bees this year seem to be a little better. And I just wonder if maybe it's because their mite load maybe isn't quite as high. Maybe they're not sick, with the mites transmitting the viruses and diseases. Sick bees might be cranky bees. I don't know. But I also have introduced some new genetics, and so I'm working on it. I would say very, very few of my bees are anywhere close to as gentle as yours, but they're more gentle than they're getting to be where, I can actually go in them now without having to really I wear my jacket. I just do that. That's just something I do. I always start with a veiling, usually end up with a jacket on, but there have been some times when it's just been miserable to work them, and I don't want to. If I want to sell nukes and queens, I don't want to have that type of genetics. I want to make it more workable. But I think people down here are just kind of, they just expect to need to wear most of them just expect to wear a veil or jacket, because I think the genetics down here, at least the ones that in this immediate area, the local stock is a little bit feisty, but we're working on it. We're going to hopefully get there. So
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
Paul, I prefer to work my colonies. Now, I've got 2 that I'm going to requeen because they're a little bit more temperamental, but they were both swarm catches from last year. So really, I don't know the genetics, where they came from. I think the one came from one of mine, but it's on an end colony, so it gets the drift. There's those factors into why it might be a little bit more testy. But I usually tend to work my colonies in shorts. I throw shorts on, and I've got a cap. There's sometimes that I'll put a jacket on if they start getting at my arms. But
your bees have to be half decent for sure if you're able to do that.
Yeah.
We wear basically what we're comfortable with, and I give everybody that works here a pair of coveralls. Most of them don't put them on the entire year, but 15 years ago, every time you went to a bee yard, you put on a pair of coveralls. So it's things have changed a lot.
That's great.
If I may, I'd like to circle back, Bruce,
Sure.
back to that breeding for resistance to Varroa mites, where we did find that the grooming behavior was the best correlation to low Varroa growth rate, and much better than hygienic behavior, which is what everybody here has been doing for 25 years, breeding for hygienic behavior, hoping we'll get more resistance there. It's not really working out. So we're finding the grooming is better, but what I think is best about what we're doing is this LVG method isn't just selecting for one mechanism, it's capturing any mechanisms that might be out there. We're not smart enough to know really what combination of factors is going to lead to resistance, but we can learn that from looking at that growth rate there, and in doing that, anybody can do this kind of selection. Some of these measures for suppression of mite resistance and VSH and everything, they're difficult for scientists to do, let alone your average beekeeper.
Yeah.
Anybody can count mites. So, but a bit flashing a bit forward, Bruce, to you speaking of getting into queen rearing and nuke sales. That's something that, because we became more or less self-sufficient here, we could no longer buy package bees. People got into nuke production and then into queen production. But mated queens aren't necessarily even a go-to option until down the road. Like, there really isn't. Like, well, I'm trying to really push the value of queen cells. For yourself, if you're raising those queen cells, if you make up a nuke and you sell that with the queen that it has in it, you're popping a queen cell into your colony, and you don't need a mating nuke. You don't. All you have is a hive you're putting a queen cell into. Queen's getting mated there. You sell a nuke out of it the next year, and you're in a way producing queens and nukes. And for most people, that's what they want. They need replacement bees. Now, we do work on selling mated queens. A lot of our beekeepers do that here too. But by the time we can produce them here, we live in a different world than you do. By the time we can produce mated queens, it's the middle of June. And a lot of our beekeepers would much rather have them earlier in the year. So what those mated queens end up being used for is requeening rather than splitting. And so early part of the year, the queen cells are the most valuable thing.
I just dropped 40 queen cells in this past weekend. So I've found it's a couple of reasons it's advantageous. Number one, like you say, early in the season, it's easier to get a hold of the queen cells. And number two, it's much more affordable. We can get queen cells here locally for $4 to $5 per cell, as opposed to anywhere from $25 to $45 for a mated queen, depending on where you order from and the genetics you're ordering from. And so, and it's quick, it's early, it's easy. And if you drop a $5 queen cell or a $4 queen cell in a colony and it doesn't take, you can just recombine, or you can, it's $4 or $5 instead of, you don't have to feel quite so bad about losing that colony. But if you do it properly, I've had tremendous success with cells over the years. And last year we dropped a bunch in. I ordered some mated queens from Greg and from a local guy who has some, supposedly some calmer bees down here, and some from Jose, the California beekeeper out there out west. And so trying to change the genetics. I guess the question I would have about that too, Paul, is if you want to change the genetics quickly, if you want to change the attitude quickly, do you feel that a mated queen situation is better if you can do that to actually really change the genetics, or would you just kind of gradually introduce more and more cells with desired genetics?
Don't know what the right answer is there, but yeah, for sure, if I had a couple hives and I wanted to improve the genetics, I'd go buy mated queens for them. But that said, the success rate of introducing a mated queen and introducing a queen cell is very much equivalent in our experience here. So a mated queen isn't necessarily going to be easier to introduce. You're just getting all the genetics. So to create the drones, to create the entire environment. But I guess if you're selecting the best colonies out of what you have, and you're eliminating the bad genetics or the ones that are undesirable, you're kind of accomplishing the same thing as bringing a new queen in, if that makes sense. You just you just have to be willing to eliminate those bad colonies or those that don't have the desired genetics, which is still, that's very difficult. In my situation, I probably have, like, just say I have 100 colonies, that if I've got, 60% of them are more feisty than I want them to be, maybe 20% of them are off the chain. I need to get rid of them, or maybe 10% of them are. So those aren't so hard to get rid of, but it's those middle ground ones that are just, they're not super bad, but they're not super gentle either. If you eliminate all the bad ones, then you only have 30 or 40 colonies left out of 100. It can get that can just really cut you back. And so I think with me, it just has to be a little more of a gradual thing. And I feel like as I introduce more, even if they're through queen cells, more genetics into the area from other sources, or desired sources, eventually it'll start to tone things down a little bit. And I've never been really too concerned about the bees having a little bit of defensive nature, because we have there's some predators around, of the human kind or of the animal kind that can get around them. And so if I don't mind if a skunk or something's trying to mess with that hive, or a raccoon's trying to pull the sugar off the top or whatever, if they're a little bit feisty, but when they just chase you around the yard and they become unworkable when you crack the lid, that's when they've got to go. Or if they're just super runny on the frames, if they're just not, it just becomes not fun that way. And I'm still trying to figure it all out, but we're starting to get an idea, I think, of what I want to do and go in that direction. So, man, good stuff. You're heading the right way. It does take time. And, I'm thinking way back, like when I first got into bees were bees. I didn't know any better. It does take a little while to start to see the differences from one hive to another. And, if a hive was defensive, I always blamed myself, like, oh, I must have done something wrong or whatever. But after time, and if you get good at managing bees and keep your management methods consistent from hive to hive, and just use the best beekeeping technique you can, then you start seeing, pretty dramatic differences. But it does take time to learn those things. And if you don't know how to light a smoker, or where to stand around a beehive, or how to behave around a beehive, then they're all terrible to work with. So
absolutely,
so true. Yeah, I didn't learn some of that until it took me a couple years. And now, like, as far as my queens, there's, I order any of my queens from Greg. And he's about 2 hours, like 15 minutes from me. So, I don't even have to worry about getting them shipped or anything. I take a drive, and I tend to work out in one of his bee yards for a little bit, and we chat bees. And when I drive home, I've got them in my pocket. If I don't get them from him, I get them from the California Beekeeper, and it's an operation. They're Uribe honeybees. And at first I didn't know anything about genetics when I very first started, and it was very popular around my area. Everybody got Italians. So when I got my packages, I got Italians. And, Italians do what Italians do. And I've learned now that I primarily, I'm drawn towards the hybrids, those that have been bred just for certain specific traits. And they've done exceptionally well. And I think, like, Greg calls his their Appalachian mutts, but they're like a Caucasian kind of, hybrid mix. And that's more or less, I've kind of gotten the same from Jose also, is they're a hybrid, and they all have done exceptionally well. They've kept as far as temperament. Man, I would have a difficult time if I was down in Alabama having to work some of those colonies. But, at my scale, I just go straight to the mated. And that way I know where I'm getting them from. I know that, they, like Greg, I've been down there, so I've seen his operation. And I had the opportunity also to go through with Jose at Uribe honeybees. I was on a work trip in California and was close to his area. So I went out, and he took me through an entire yard and just explained how they do the breeding and everything like that. So, to go through an operation with someone that you get your queens from, it just, I stick to those two guys now. So, because I know how they do their work, and it's been successful for me. So,
No, that's great. And sometimes you do have to look around. If you're not happy with your bees, try some from somewhere else, compare them, see what they look like.
Yeah.
But once you do find kind of bee you work with, the kind of people you like to deal with, stick with them, support them. The people that are in queen rearing business, they need support. They need people buying queens from them to keep them going. And especially if it's something local. I mean, there's a lot of value in supporting other local beekeepers. We've done a lot of work in teaching people how to raise queen bees and do bee breeding, but we're really not trying to encourage everybody to do this. We need to, some people need to be the producers, and other people need to be the buyers. We need both.
That's right.
If you have people that are keeping bees at a small scale, never requeening, splitting hives that are going to be swarming, they're breeding for more swarmy bees. They're breeding for worse genetics because they're not doing any kind of selection by just splitting every random hive. So if we work with people that are working at this at a professional level, producing queens, they're doing their best to produce good queens, both in terms of their physiology and genetics. And they need our support, and it's worth spending the money on good queens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of Jose, he just jumped on, the California beekeeper here.
Oh, hey, Jose.
He's talking about he just set up some cell builders and breeders. So Matt Kirkland had a good, actually a really good question, because this does make a difference. He said, Paul, are you judging temperament during the dearth or the major flow?
Both. We don't do it just once. So we tend to be doing this more in the spring when the flows are a little off and on. But we do follow up through the year and check over time. I do find that our bees, when we get into August, where we have more significant dearths, And we also have days that will turn during the day where you have a bit of nectar coming in the morning and maybe not in the afternoon. I was disappointed what our bees look like at that time of year. We think we've got great bees until that happens, until that arrives. And that is really when you can see the differences, because as this question kind of alluded to, most bees look pretty good when there's a good nectar flow on.
That's true. I also, down here in the South, I'm sure it's this way everywhere to some extent, but man, some of the changes, like you said, even within a day when a thunderstorm begins to roll in, or just the barometric pressure changes, I'm not sure what causes the bees to be feisty. One example, just this past Thursday, was when I broke out a bunch of splits. And earlier in that day, a couple of my buddies' partners had been in their bees, and one of them said, "I think I've got a hive that's Africanized." He went out there like at 6 a.m. The guy works full time, and he's like, he was just trying to make some splits so we could get those cells and drop them in. We kind of split a cell order. And so my other buddy, Tyler, said, "Well, yeah, kill them, kill every bee if they're that bad." And then Tyler got in some bees later in the day and said, "They're all like that. It's just must be the weather." He's like, "It's a sting. It's a wear a complete suit and sting through the glove kind of day." And Tyler's bees aren't that bad normally. They're normally fairly calm. And I went out, though, about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I got off work a half a day and went out and started pulling splits, and they weren't bad at all. I'm like thinking, man, my bees, maybe they're okay. But then about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it started to get kind of dark, and it started to actually rain. And then they were stinging me. I've never been stung through my ventilated suit, but it was wet and on my arms. And so they, obviously you're working them when it's wet and it's raining and it's almost dark, and they're going to get you. So a lot of it, I think, does have to do with the weather. And sometimes, people look at my videos from a couple of years ago and even last year, and they say, "Man, your bees are rough." But then some times of the year, they're not bad at all. So I think there's a lot to that question from Matt, in that, I think the weather does play a role.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure it does. Season weather, the daily weather. Another thing is your bee yard location. Maybe different for you in the South, Bruce, with the temperatures you get down there, but we really try to make sure our bee yards are full sun all day long. And I find that makes a difference. Much more actively foraging, so that helps. Older bees being out foraging, but they also see the beekeeper's movements less in full sun, and so there's less of a response of defensive bees going towards your movement. So that can make a big difference. And many beekeepers don't have a lot of great choices to where they might put their bees if they want to keep them on their own property. Maybe they even want to hide them somewhere. So there may be more likely to be in the shade, but that makes a big difference.
This is a question here. The mini mating nukes. So this is from Jose. Mr. Kelly, I've seen a video of you and your students setting up the mini mating nukes. How do they hold up with the humidity where you guys are at?
In our area, we get to, this is where it gets tough. I really can only think in Celsius. I can't think in Fahrenheit. And that's one thing that we totally changed over to here. Kilometers.
I'll do the conversion.
There you go. Thank you, Brian. We get to roughly 30 C here. It hardly gets beyond that through the summer, but we might have up to 10 days that are at 30 C. So what do we got there for temperature?
So that's 86 Fahrenheit.
Okay. High humidity here. We're in the middle of the Great Lakes. So we're surrounded by Great Lakes. So the humidity is very high here. And the nukes do fine. Like, as long as there's a nectar flow going on, they do fine. They don't do well in cold temperatures. They have a harder time regulating their temperature when it's cold like that. And they also don't have a lot of food reserves. So or even a lot of growth potential in terms of the size there. So they're more fragile. We have good success with them, but we also run some of what we call four-way nukes. And we do have several videos on that in case you're interested in seeing those. But they're a bit more robust. They're a little bit bigger, more food reserves, easier to thermoregulate, being a little bit bigger. And they're kind of nice to work with because you take a lid off, you peel a canvas inner cover off, and you have 4 nukes open right in front of you. So if you want to change any frames around or anything, it's all right there. So I'm getting to like those a lot. But the biggest reason we switched to them is because we started having more and more problems with raccoons destroying the little styrofoam mini nukes.
Oh, okay.
Having to strap them down and then cage them and then
just
go to extreme lengths to try and keep the coons from destroying them. Whereas a wooden nuke box, with a standard wooden lid on it and a brick on top, are pretty well impervious to raccoons.
Yeah, I know when I was in California visiting with Jose, he would have a problem with coyotes, and there were other animals that would get out into one of his mating yards, and you would just see those smaller ones just thrown everywhere.
Yeah, they just scatter them. We had coons rolling. We had them strapped to cement blocks, like big cement blocks, 8-inch cement blocks, very firmly strapped to them, and the coons would roll them 100 feet, and eventually they would break apart, and they'd be able to get them apart. But imagine, like I would really like to see that happening. Well, not really, but it was kind of amazing. And then bits and pieces scattered everywhere. So no, it's pretty discouraging. And that happened on more on one of our mating islands than anywhere else. We're still able to use those styrofoam mini nukes at our home location here, no problem. Just have them strapped to a nuke, strapped to a cement block, and the coons here haven't figured it out. But it just happens right next to where we have our bees on this island. They were culling cormorants. I don't know if you guys know what cormorants are, black bird, fish hunting bird. They were culling them and shooting them by the thousands and leaving them on the ground. And the raccoons were getting to be the size of bears, eating them.
Oh my gosh.
And populating like crazy.
Oh my gosh.
We're having no problem at all to that.
Wow. Hey, we have a brand new beekeeper. Well, soon to be brand new beekeeper here. And the question, starting beekeeping this spring, and I know what I would say. Do you recommend to start with 1 or 2? And if 2, now this is the good part of the question here. Is it better to get them from the same supplier or different ones?
Well, great, Jisri. I'm glad you're getting into bees there. And it's an excellent question. We always recommend, as I'm sure Brian was about or would love to say, that the 2 is generally recommended for a bunch of reasons, which I'll get into. But I would also get them from the same supplier. Get to know somebody, get to see what you think of their bees over time. And the reason I recommend the same supplier is you're more likely to get similar stock in both hives. As a brand new beekeeper, first you need to know what bees do before you start comparing different ones. And if those are comparable, you'll still see differences because some hives end up being stronger, some are weaker. Conditions show up in one that maybe don't show up in other. If you only have one hive, you have nothing to compare to. So you have so many fewer learning opportunities.
Yeah. Excellent. Bruce, you look like you're in deep thought.
I'm just
You know,
enjoying the show.
I know, and I said earlier, I said, we could talk about splits and we could talk about springtime, bee management. We haven't gotten to any of that yet. And time wise, we're 1 hour in. So at whatever point, your schedule, you have to, run away.
Right.
Feel
Well,
free.
how about we say another 10 minutes just so we can wind things up a little bit and they're not
Yeah.
just disappearing all of a sudden here.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We found in these videos that typically right when we want to wind it down is when more people jump on. So that's how it usually goes.
we initially tried to keep these to 1 hour, and that got blown out of the water every week. So we tend to just always say we're going to stay on for 2 hours, and so. But there are others that stay on longer, and I don't know how they do it. So.
Right. Well, when I do hop off, I know the rest of your audience there is in great hands, so you guys can keep the conversation rolling.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
There was a question very early on, and I know, like, as far as spring management and just doing splits and things like that, I know I've watched, a number of the videos that you have out. Are we going to be seeing more videos coming out from you?
We love doing videos. We try to do as many as we can, but we have a very active research program here.
Mm-hmm.
We teach 800 students a year in a beekeeping course of some sort. And then I do a heck of a lot of speaking engagements, roughly 200 a year. So it's kind of, we like to do it all. We like to do more, but right now we're at 80 or thereabouts, 80. So there may well be videos out there that people haven't seen yet. So check if you go to our homepage and our YouTube channel, there are playlists there, and just kind of work through the playlists. I think what a lot of people do is just see ones that pop up as suggestions or however that works.
Mm-hmm.
And so they see our videos here and there in amongst other beekeepers' videos, which is good, but they may not know all of the ones that we have. So rather than ask us to do more, I'm going to ask you guys to do more and try and make sure you see the ones that perhaps you've missed.
Yeah.
Something else I'd like to say too, though, our website, we've been working on it to try and improve the resources for beekeepers section amongst other sections there. We have a volunteer. We have many volunteers help us out, but one of our newer volunteers teaches design and graphics. It's this SolidWorks graphics program that he uses, and he's gone through all of the different devices that we've developed here, different beekeeping devices and accessories, and created very professional plans for how people can make them themselves. And so we have those on our website. Yeah, thanks for scrolling through there. That's great.
Yeah.
But there's lots more there as well. It's just that's something that's kind of new. Have been encouraged by a marketing consultant to do more on social media. So we're trying to get better at doing that. But we post basically because it's easy to Instagram, which then automatically goes on to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big social media user, but I am finding that can be an effective educational tool. I never really thought of it that way previously, but so what we do try and do is give updates on a regular basis on how our bees are doing, or what kind of activities we're doing, where we're going to be speaking, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's interest in more information, some of it can be found just by having a look at our social media as well. We're at the Hive Life Conference. We kind of launched in a bigger way something that we've been calling for years our Hive Life photos.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I haven't had Cayman come after me yet over the that name. I don't expect that's going to happen, but it's kind of a name we had for these photographs, so it's kind of stuck. But they're pictures taking of, and these are available on our website. We did a video talking about these as well. But we have sets of 10, everything normal that you can see inside a beehive. They're photographs taken. There you go. Great work, Brian. So those are meant to be mounted in wooden frames. They're life size, laminated.
Wow.
They're quite thick, rigid. And so anything you can see inside a beehive, you can see in picture form. And so they're really great for beekeeping clubs and even individual beekeepers that are like you guys teaching other people,
Mm-hmm.
or people that are selling honey and products and want to talk to their consumers. One set we don't recommend to people selling honey is our disease and parasite set. So we have a set of 10 that show all the gnarly, nasty stuff you might be able to see in a beehive, just so you can recognize the difference between what's good and what's bad. And then we have a small set of 4 normal pictures that are meant to be taken to a kindergarten class or something where you don't need a heck of a lot there. So we're just starting to market those in a bigger way. We've marketed them regionally for quite a while, but the disease and parasite one is newer, and we're finding people are really receptive to that. So just want to mention some of the other educational things there. And yes, we will try and do more videos.
Excellent.
Right.
Now, question, before our time hits, are you going to have the Hive Life photos at the conference in West Virginia?
Yes. Yeah. We're taking, I hope enough. It's I'm told that's be about roughly 400 people showing up at that one. Whereas Hive Life, it was what, 1,800 or something?
Yeah.
We were totally overwhelmed. We sold, remember the first night there was a 2-hour session. We sold out of some of our stuff that first 2 hours. I was just staggered with that was just such an amazing experience there. But and now everybody said, you need to start Hive Life up here in Canada. You should do that. I said, no, you should all go down to the one in Tennessee.
Go to Tennessee,
It's already going.
Let Cayman do the work.
That's right.
Yeah. Now I will. I'll have to stop by in West Virginia because I'll be down there.
Yeah.
It's only like a 3-hour drive from where I live at. So
yeah,
I plan on being there for both days.
I'm kind of amazed. It's only a 6-hour drive from where I am. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So no, I'm really looking forward to getting down there. And I'll let you in on something here. I love speaking to American audiences, American groups. You guys let people know what you're thinking. You react and you respond. You ask questions. We're way more subdued up here in Canada, and so it's fun to come down and chat with you folks.
Might be because you guys are still frozen.
That could be. Yeah, we're just nice. We don't want to say anything wrong. So I don't know. I do see a bit of a difference, and it's a lot of fun for us.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
We appreciate you coming on, man. We may have to have you on again. We didn't even talk about the topics we were planning on talking.
I know.
Yeah, there's always another time, guys.
But there was some valuable information there about queens. I think we, just dug down a little deep there and got into some good stuff that people want to learn and know about, me in particular. So I appreciate you coming on tonight and discussing that with us.
Yeah.
My pleasure, guys. It's always fun to talk bees, and I love learning from folks like you too. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right,
Thank you. And I'll see you in a week and a half.
Sounds great, Brian.
So
All
yeah,
right.
excellent. Thank you again, and yeah, we'll
Thanks, Paul.
definitely have to line up another evening.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks a
So,
lot.
Paul, you
Right.
take care.
You too, guy.
See you.
I think he's going to drop off. There we
There we
go.
go.
Wow.
That was fun.
Can you picture the conversation that would take place if we had like a Corey Stevens
Oh man.
sitting at a round table with Paul, and I would just sit back.
That's what you'd have to do almost, because man, they are so far ahead of where I'm
Wow.
at.
Yeah.
So what everybody think about that? That was pretty cool.
That's yeah.
Now we didn't even we had 4 or 5 topics we were going to cover, mostly about springtime and splits and swarms and whatever else. I'm not sure what all we had, Brian, on that topic list, but we ended up talking about queens, and I think there was some extremely valuable information there. I had never heard of that particular method of the grooming assessment that they're doing. So man, you combine that with what Corey's doing, and even Ashby Miller, who was on a recent video I did on my channel, interview, some work that he's working with some stuff on, along with Corey on the what is it called, the unhealthy brood odor, for those who may not have watched that video. You can go back and watch it. But there are some really neat things happening out there with research with beekeepers who are keeping bees, not just, they're really trying to drill down and figure out some solutions to help with the mite problem. And I think it was either Corey or Ashby one. We talked about how even if you can eliminate one, or maybe it was Ian, it was one of those guys we've talked to recently about, if you could even eliminate one treatment a year, how much of an impact that could have on your operation. It could help with cost, it could help with time, it could really help a lot. And so there's some people out there really on the front lines trying to figure this stuff out. And what I like about it is they're willing to share. Corey is willing to teach whatever he's doing to assess for mites to anybody, I think, or else you can go, he can refer you to the website or the video, the information you go to figure out how to do the test they're doing, the different assays, the different tests they're doing, to actually look for those tendencies and those behaviors in their bees. And so it's something any of us can do. It takes a lot of work, and I haven't been able to figure out the time to do that. I do the alcohol or the mite washes and the treatments, the kind of before and after. So I'm just kind of going down that path a little bit, but I hope to be able to combine what I've learned from Corey, Ashby, and now Paul, and even Greg, and just kind of try to figure out how to put it all together in my situation a little bit.
I wonder if moving forward, and I'm going to throw out a disclaimer, I'm not putting any more thoughts into Bruce's head so that he thinks of another direction, because his mind is already thinking in 20 directions right now. But I wonder if, because your home yard, that apiary, you have limited number of colonies, I wonder if you try and really hone in on certain traits or certain styles of beekeeping in that home yard. And then once you really, iron it out there, just expand it out to your out yards.
You talking about the one here in my backyard with
just use your backyard as like your what did King
lab
call his?
I call
like
it
a bee lab.
Bee lab back here. That's kind of the idea behind that. I've that's kind of what I've done back here. I've got the nice looking colonies, but really I really can't have many more colonies here in my backyard. I live on a 3rd-acre lot in a suburban area. So I literally have a privacy fence and then a house about 10 feet behind that privacy fence right behind my hives. And so fortunately, the bees tend to fly forward and out and up over my house instead of back over the neighbor's house. I've never had any complaints from those neighbors, but literally my bees are probably 15 or 20 feet, some of them from that house. And so maybe 30 feet, but they're pretty darn close. And so I've got to be careful. I had up to 15 or even maybe more colonies in my backyard, maybe even up to like 17 or 18 at one time between nukes and stuff. I used to bring my swarms here. And I bring splits. I just bring stuff here. Like if I had hives I was trying to watch closely, I bring them to my backyard and just put them, and it was just got to be where there were way too many bees flying around. You couldn't even go in the backyard here in town without bees everywhere. They didn't bother the neighbors really, but man, we couldn't even go in the backyard. There was too many bees. And so I've kind of tried to streamline that and get it down. I still may bring a nuke here or there in and do some things, or maybe bring a swarm here if I catch it, to kind of just let them get established. But most of my stuff I'm trying to move out pretty quickly. But yeah, absolutely. Like that hive, the queen from Greg.
Yeah.
I think he picked the one that he thought was going to be the best one, and we put it in the one in the backyard. And I do have, oh goodness, at least 3 of them are really pretty calm right now, if not 4 of them. I've got a total of 8 now with the split I made. A couple of them are a little bit feisty, and then the other one's kind of, the one that had all the mites in it is kind of intermediate, but I'm not sure if they're cranky because of the mites or just because they're not horrible. But I am going to try to get all really nice bees in the backyard, and maybe it might be a good place to do some grafting, do that kind of thing, set up some cell builders right here where I can do the grafting and then move the cells out to the out yards once I make those splits. And so, but also I will tell you this, right here in this area, we live at the place is called the Woodlands. All around us, if you kind of go down the hill, maybe a little over a half mile, there's like a swampy area and woods everywhere. And the tallow that you hear so much about in the South is just everywhere. And so I wish I could drop 100 colonies right here, because it's the best area for bees of all my areas. I think it's just incredible, but I just can't have any more right here. It'd be too much for my backyard.
Yeah.
But, it's a lot of fun. It's crazy.
I could toss 30 or 40 right outside of the windows here, but yeah, that'll never happen.
Well, you have to stay married, so that's important.
Yeah,
that is pretty important. But
Bride 50, I see it. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun. That was great having Paul on. I'm glad you were able to reach out to him. And
it just I just figured after Hive Life, reach out. So yeah, and I think it's been, I know he's busy, but gosh, I think we've been chatting through emails for well over a month and a half. So, but yeah, that's awesome. So, but yeah, I know we wanted to talk about splits, and I know you just did a bunch of gangbuster splits the other day, and swarm controls, and just different things like that. But I guess that's going to be for an upcoming session.
Yeah,
so
we could talk a little bit about the splits if you wanted to.
Yeah, how many splits did you just do?
I think I ended up with about 35 maybe. I did have some colonies that were a little bit weaker that it got to where it was getting late in the day and the bees were getting chippy. This was almost dark again. And I had some that I know are weak. And when Brian Lee and I went through, we had killed a couple of queens and some weak colonies, and I dropped some cells on all those. And I had 2 or 3 extra cells right at the end of the day, and I just kind of stuck them in a couple of colonies. And theoretically, if that bee emerges, that queen bee emerges, and the other queen is weak, maybe she'll take that queen out, maybe not. But they're $4 a piece. So
yeah,
what do you do?
Yeah.
But I'm real excited. The cells were beautiful. And this year, for the first time, I tried the little cell protectors, the little orange cell protectors with the spikes on either side. And that way, I think it'll really give that new little virgin queen a good chance to emerge and get out into the colony before they get to know her a little better. It also protects it from being squished between the frames in any sort of way. And so I really like those. Stan Gore, I think it was, had actually really recommended those in the past, and I've never really used them, but I think it's a good idea. I also utilized Corey Stevens' queen introduction method. You can use it with cells, virgin queens or mated queens. And to review that real quickly, and there is a video that I put out on that recently, Corey Stevens talks about a method that's a little bit non-traditional, as Greg would say, maybe even contrary. But what you do is, instead of making the split and then dropping a queen in there right within a day or two, the idea is that you make sure those bees are hopelessly queenless. And you can do it a couple of ways. The way we did it was we pulled the bees above the brood above a queen excluder that we were going to use in the splits. And those cells, they were, Kenneth, those cells were supposed to emerge either that night or the next night, I think within a day or two of emerging. And so they were really ripe cells ready to go. And we purchased those cells from a friend down in Florida. So, but we pulled the brood above the queen excluder. In the past, I've done that, let the bees move up on the brood and then take them up away. You can set them in the same bee yard, but you do risk some of the bees flying back to the donor colony. Or what I did actually was moved into a different location. That way you keep any foragers that are in that colony. And I split them off and I moved them. And then, but before I actually pulled them off the colonies, I was going to wait a week, 6 or 7 days minimum. Corey says 7 to 9 days, but we found out the cells were going to be available a day sooner. So I went ahead and did it. Like, I think some of them were 5 days, some were 6 before we dropped the cells in them. But I just left them above the queen excluder for those days. I didn't have a chance to pull them off. You can do it either way. And then I pulled them off. I broke the splits out last Thursday afternoon and Friday morning. Actually from there, when you go through those though, you have to make sure you kill any queen cells that they've made on the brood, because if you don't, then they would rather have, many times they'd rather accept that queen that they've made over the cell that you drop in there. So as you move them into the nuke, you got to look at them really closely and destroy any cells that are on there. And then, they're hopelessly queenless. The idea is the larva is too old to make any more queen cells. And so you should have them much more readily willing to accept that new queen or queen cell or mated or virgin queen or whatever. And so then you drop in the nuke, take them, and then, fairly quickly after that, you can go ahead and drop the queen cells in there or whatever you're doing. And with those bees being hopelessly queenless, the idea is that they'll accept her more readily. And so it is an extra step, because what a lot of people do, a lot of pros do, is they pull those splits off, and then they just drop queens in there within a day or two, and then they just roll with it. And so you got to leave them a while, go back again. And it is a little more time consuming, but I was very impressed with how the bees just jumped on those queen cells, like they're very interested in them. As soon as I dropped those cells in there, if you watch my most recent video, you'll see near the end, the bees just basically ran right up to the cells and started checking them out. And they were real excited to have them in there. So I'm excited to see what happens. It's hard for me to stay out of them for a couple of weeks because I want to get in them, but that's another thing that's important for those who may be kind of new on here. It's best if you wait at least 2 weeks to go check on them, because sometimes those virgin queens can be skittish. It's just best to leave them alone for a couple of weeks, as hard as that is. Yeah. Sometimes I'll peek in and just kind of pull the cell out if it's sitting on top of the frames and look at it, but really it's best just to leave them alone, just to let them do their thing. Check on them in 2 to 3 weeks and look for eggs. And then if you don't see any eggs, maybe wait another week. And by then you should know whether or not you've got a queen. In last year, I had a lot that it took almost a month to have a new queen in there. And what I think happened was, what I believe probably happened was they made their own queen cells. Like they probably killed the virgin queen, waited for their queen cell to emerge, and then mated her. So it took longer that way. Because it should be a little quicker if that queen cell emerges and then they get mated right away. It should be a couple of weeks down the road and they should start laying.
Yeah, when I do my splits, no, I've never used cells. I just, I'm sure I could. I mean, I could easily probably give Greg a call, because I know going through his yards, he has cells all the time. So, I've never gone that route. I've always gone the route of, just prepping the hives like a day before. I'll usually let them go a day before I install the mated queen, but I'll move brood frames up, and if you put them above a queen excluder, you'll have all your nurse bees and that go up, and then your queen's not up there if you've shaken them all down first, and you just move them over to a new spot. That's typically how I do my splits, and it's so darn easy. I mean, it's almost foolproof when when you shake them all down and you move brood frames up, you let the bees go up, and they'll even move up. Yeah, they'll move up within even
a couple hours,
a few hours. Yeah, and you could even move them over to the new location. But that's what I'm going to do this year, is just keep it simple like that. And
That's basically what we did. That's my favorite method. That queen excluder. Last year we did all of my pollination bees when they came back. We did that in the morning, and then by the afternoon we just pulled the top box off and took them,
yeah,
and it works well. There was a question about, would you ever use 2 nuke boxes above the queen excluder, then add 2 queen cells? Yes, you can do that. If it's a 5-frame nuke, you can go 2 nuke boxes. But remember, if it's a 10-frame nuke, the nuke boxes are going to be wider, so you can't put they won't fit on there properly because you got that middle wall that would develop there. But what I did, if you watch my most recent video, we did actually pull 2 splits out of some of those really strong colonies. Like one of the ones in the video, they were super strong, a lot of brood. We had pulled up above the queen excluder, and so we had literally 10 frames, of course, above the queen excluder that we pulled, and I basically just split it 50-50. I took 5 on the left and put them in one nuke box, 5 on the right. Maybe I mixed the food around a little bit, but basically 2 to 3 frames of brood and a couple frames of food in each one, and just took 10 frames, 2 splits, and we were ready to go. So I did set them up there where it was real easy to do that. I'd also like to extend a little bit of some thanks to Brian Lee, who came down from Birmingham and helped me set up those splits that day. Birmingham is it's a little over 3 hours from here, and he drove down here and helped me. He just wanted to have the experience, but he was a huge help, and hopefully he learned something from it. And we had a good time, and it was great to be able to hang out with my viewers and get that done. So
yeah. Hey, I saw a question here, and before it slips out of my mind, do you want to discuss who's going to be on next, or leave it a secret?
It doesn't matter to me.
Dr. Cameron Jack from the University of Florida is scheduled. The date, you all are just going to have to keep on watching, because we're not going to tell you that. But it's already ironed out. It's in the books. We have a date. We have a time, 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central. But Dr. Cameron Jack is going to be on next. So
yeah, I understand. We're not having a ton of guests right now, with the 3 of us, with Greg on here. There's just Greg, just a wealth of knowledge at different levels, but we are going to continue to bring some folks on here or there. If we run into an opportunity to have someone on, and not to say we won't do more guests in the future, but it's really just kind of cool to see what we're all doing. And that way we can be more, share sometimes more easily with all the viewers as well, kind of the questions they have. And so we're trying to focus on the stream team and then bring in an occasional guest instead of trying to have that obligation to bring in a different guest on every week.
Yeah.
And that was fun. It was good. And we did that for a while, but I think it works good this way, to be able to do it this way, and then be able to kind of reach out and bring guests on, reach out to some of the more, like Paul Kelly is one great example. It took some time to get him on, and but it worked out. And Brian, you've got a few more irons in the fire. Brian is the contact person. He's so good at reaching out to these people. He's able to, I don't know what he does to get them to come on, but they, I guess extended invitation is the main thing, right, Brian? Yeah. We're willing to work around their schedule. And so we don't want to just bring people on just to have people on. We want to make sure that we have a purpose behind what we're doing. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we've had some really incredible conversations with the 3 of us, and even the 2 of us. And so we're trying to kind of figure out how to mix it up to where we keep that formula going, to where we can have those really good conversations and also have some guests on here or there. So I think it's working out good. People seem to still like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and if we, I think having the guests like Paul Kelly, Dr. Jack will be on, Dr. Peck was on. I think having those guests and just all of the knowledge that they have, and, we can, for all of our viewers that do watch, I mean, it's just an opportunity for everyone really to learn. So that's why I've been reaching out to all of those guys. I mean, I had reached out to a couple other folks, and just schedules and things like that.
Sure.
But we're keeping it rolling. Yeah, Dr.
Oh yeah,
Peck
for
was
sure.
great. But yeah, we're keeping it rolling. But the guests, yeah, I mean it is some work sometimes getting some of the folks on because the schedules and things like that. I saw one comment on here about Sammy Ramsey. I've been in touch with his assistant, but he is so busy. I know he just has a show also, so he is filming. He is doing so much. For him to have time, it's just non-existent.
Yeah.
He's got a new job out. He's working in Colorado, so it's just you can't even imagine the demand that he is in. So maybe someday though.
Yeah, we're not giving up on anybody. We're not afraid to ask anybody.
Yeah.
And Brian's been reaching out to somebody who is a super, super well-known person, and that person has actually reached back out to him. So maybe who knows what the future
Yeah.
holds. We're not going to say what it is because it may or may not happen, but
Right.
we're seeing some response from some folks. Hey, there was a question on here, Brian. Maybe we could address this a little bit. Last week, what happened? You want to talk about that, or just kind of say what happened?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was just, I think it was the almost the perfect storm. It was, at least on my end, I was home alone and had, how old was he last week? 13-week-old puppy that literally like 20 minutes before the live stream, and I'm up here trying to set up all the gear and everything. I look across the room, the computer room here, and he's going to the bathroom on the floor over there as I'm trying to set up stuff. And I'm like, no. So I'm running, trying to deal with him. And, and Greg had some things going on last week as well. So it was just like,
yeah, it just didn't work out. And occasionally that's going to happen. We don't, and that literally happened, Brian, like 10 minutes before the chat. I mean, we had everything planned, and it just, it just kind of fell apart on us, and we do apologize, but every once in a while that's life gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah. I see here, got to get Dr. Humberto on. We actually had him on. He was one of the first ones. It's been like a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, Matthew, I'll see him at the conference in West Virginia, and have already, spoken to him about grabbing dinner and stuff that night also. So, just to sit down, you talk to people online, but when you get to sit down with them and have dinner and just chat, I'll ask him about coming on again. So, because Humberto, he's up there also. I mean, he's doing the research, he just has years of experience there. And I mean, could you picture a conversation, Bruce, with Humberto, Paul, Corey?
Even throw Greg in the mix, because Greg
I know
all that too. So
well, and it would be us, and all I would do is I would do this right here. Well, I wouldn't have that one on there, but I would just sit back and I would just take in the conversation that I'm listening to, because it just it would be unreal. So.
Hey, John asked, where's Greg tonight? Greg has something going on tonight. He couldn't make it, and that's about all we can really say about that. He just didn't have access to internet at the time the stream started, and so that's about all we can say. He I mean, literally let us know pretty quickly right before the thing started that was going to happen, and so he had something else he had to do. But
things pop up.
Greg is he's coming into that season right now to where he is so busy, just doing everything he's got to do that last year it happened a few times. He just couldn't make it on. And so we expect some of that from each of us, but we plan to carry it on. If we got at least two of us, we're going to be on here every Wednesday night. So Greg works at the CIA. Yeah, that's about his fourth job that he's doing is a CIA job. So
right. Yeah.
Anyway.
Right. So what do you got? What's coming down the pipe here for Bruce's Bees?
Well, I've got a couple of really fun things coming up, and I'm not going to say what they are yet, but you'll see them coming out real soon on my channel. If you've noticed, I've been trying to do at least one my goal is to do at least one video in the bees a week right now this time of the year.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to start doing some of these interviews with folks. We talked about the interviews on here. We're going to really focus on StreamTeam and then bring in some guests when it's appropriate, when we feel like I can get some certain guests on. But I'm doing these interviews with some different people and kind of carrying on that tradition of the interviews, but I'm doing them not necessarily on live interviews. That way I can really kind of ask certain questions and really drill down on certain topics. And then I'm posting those. And so if you watch my channel at Bruce's Bees, you'll see that I've already done one with Corey Stevens, Ashby Miller, Tom Nolan, and I've got one that's going to drop hopefully tomorrow night, possibly Friday night, from Gus Mitchell. I'm working on editing that now. Just to be honest, one of the things I can do in those videos, when I mumble quite a bit, if you've noticed on these videos, and so I can cut out some of my mumbling and keep the topics. I can kind of edit them down and just make them really succinct and make them so you can get the content without having to listen to me mumble and stumble around a little bit. So I'm doing that. It's kind of like the nuggets that I do with the StreamTeam stuff. I'm doing some of those as well, where I pull out some of the clips from our StreamTeam videos, I'm trying to create content that can help people really move forward in their beekeeping endeavors, those interviews. And so I've got some neat things coming up in the future. I've got some really neat guests coming on. But like I said, the next one is Gus Mitchell. Be looking for that hopefully tomorrow night, maybe Friday night. And this weekend, I'm actually going to have a fun, adventurous weekend, it looks like, and we'll be doing some filming on that. And that's just to be coming. There might be a couple of us maybe posting a video about that one. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Nice.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to create better content, more interesting content that's entertaining, but yet really drilling down on how to, on bees and what's going on with the bees here in this area. Excuse me. Yeah. And as you've seen, I've been really focused on this queen thing and trying to get my genetics better. And I'm trying to bring you guys along for the ride on that a little bit, kind of how I'm doing it. It's a little tough though, because I'm trying to get my genetics better, but then we had the opportunity to make 35 splits this weekend. I did bring in queen cells from somebody else. And so I've just got to kind of try to build it. It's going to be a slower process. I have ordered some queen cells or some virgin queens from Corey later in the year, probably in May or June, and we'll probably be talking more about that. So, man, my mind, Brian, everybody on here knows my mind is always going. I'm like, I've got to, how can I just always want to get better at everything I'm doing. And the StreamTeam stuff, I want to get better. I want to get better at the interviews. I want to get better at the whole YouTube thing. And also just most importantly, get better as a beekeeper. And so, if I do end up taking a few days off, it's because there's really something I'm working on with the bees, trying to improve a technique or something. But, let's just keep going ahead with the ride. I'm enjoying it. And I'm starting to get a focus on what I want to do more now, I think. And so it's actually coming into focus for me, and hopefully you guys can see a little bit of that as we move forward. How about you, Brian? What do you have planned for the next few weeks?
Oh, man. Well, I tell you, I was bummed out this last weekend. I was under the weather all weekend. I had the boards. I literally had everything to make all my new hive stands sitting right outside. So I probably will try and get that done here shortly. And the great secret, probably what I'm going to do is I've got 8 queens ordered from Jose. Of my 11 colonies, one of them is the 7-frame Apiary. So I'm just going to let that one build up. So really I've got 10 colonies that are in double deeps. My plan is I'm going to pinch 2 of the queens. They're on my end. They're end colonies just because they get a little bit spicy, and I just want to get those genetics out of there. So 2 of the queens I have coming in are going to go into those colonies. So I'm just going to pinch them, drop those queens in then, at the appropriate time and stack them up. I will do 6 splits, but I don't know whether I'm just going to do a 50-50, just break the colonies in half, just because I don't want to ruin a honey crop. So I'll probably go a little bit smaller than what I normally do. So of the 11 that I have, I plan on adding 6, and then I'm going to stack my others. So basically I'll have 17 colonies is what I'm looking at. I've got all the woodwork. I literally have everything. And Bruce knows, and for those on here, I had a trip down to Greg's recently, and I literally came back home, and the entire back of my trunk was filled. Seats were folded down, and I mean, it was filled from the floor up with boxes, frames, you name it. So, but I'm ready. I just got to get a couple hive stands built. I need to get in and clean out my boxes and stuff like that, just to make sure that I'm set. So what I just heard was Brian 617. That's funny. No, and it's been it. Trust me, I laugh when I see all the hashtag Brian whatevers, but time wise, if I even got 20 or so colonies, I wouldn't be able to manage them, to the degree that I do now. Just I get in them at certain points, and it's somewhat worked out, my management that I have. So look at that. See, David said his Brian 16 wasn't that far off. So, but yeah, Peter, what happened to only 11? But yeah, 17 is going to be it. So I need to make sure that everything is all set. Now, thankfully, you will hear me say this, Bruce. Thankfully, we have like a little bit of a cooling trend coming. So that's almost not a bad thing, just because last on the news, they were just talking about, trees blooming and different things like that. This area of the country, they're talking 20 plus days early as far as spring arriving. So when that happens, like I normally plan to get stuff April. When we're that early, we would literally be looking at the end of March, 1st of April, and that's unheard of for up here. So if we have a little bit of a cooling trend, I think that'll put a little bit of a halt on the colonies. So it'll buy me a little bit of time where, I can at least get things prepped and ready. So that's what I got going. I mean, trust me, people will see. I know I saw also somebody had asked about the hive stands that I build. I got that design from the Bug Farmer, and I'll go through it when I film my like expanding the apiary. I'll show everybody. It's basically a 2x6x8. You can build one stand with a 2x6x8. So they're, even with the price of wood, it's not that expensive to build a hive stand. So, but yeah, what's the cooling trend going to do to those blooms? I tell you what, Chris, our maples that we have out here, and like my tree out here, they were like this close to popping open. So it's kind of slowed them. We haven't, like, I look out in the lawn to see if we've lost any of the blooms, any of those blossoms. We haven't lost any. So I am a little concerned about that, but, it's just, we got this little cooling trend coming in here. So it's almost given me a little bit of, extra time. So, yeah.
Good, man. Well, it's been fun. For those who are coming on kind of late, go back and watch the early part of this video. We did have Paul on, but he had to step out, I think about 10 or 15 minutes into this hour. So we had it for about 70 or 75 minutes. And so it was a really good content. We focused a lot on queens and quality queens and attitude of bees, and just kind of some things they've done up there where he's at the University of Guelph to improve that. I didn't realize that in the past, when they first started, the bees up there sounded like they were a little spicy too, but they've intentionally figured out how to breed a better bee, a more gentle bee that accomplishes what their goals are. And so really great conversation of how to do that. And so if you didn't see it, and even if you did, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that again, because he
Yeah.
had some really tremendous information to share.
Yeah. No, it was good stuff. I mean, I enjoyed talking to him, and I'm about positive that as far as his bees, that they're mainly a buckfast.
Yeah,
So
I think he's talked about that. I
yeah,
don't know exactly what they
yeah,
are, but and with me, it doesn't really matter that much. I just want to have certain traits and genetics. I think
hmm,
down here, it's just the bees I have, it's no telling what they are. It's like a combination of,
yeah,
I know Greg's are Caucasian Appalachian mutts, which he does qualify that with the fact that they are heavy Caucasian influence, but they do have
hmm,
some other genetics. And I think in reality, most bees are that way. But up there, they're kind of in an area where they have, they have control pretty much of the genetics of what they're doing. And so they've
yeah,
developed a pretty darn good stock, I think.
hmm,
How far along are your tallow trees? Mine are starting to really fill up with leaves. Same thing here, Matt. They're putting on leaves. They're not totally full of leaves yet, but we're ahead here too. And I don't think I'm really ready. We've got stuff blooming, and when it comes, it comes. We're just gonna have to deal with it.
hmm,
In California, the pollination bees are still sitting out there, and it's been cold and weird. And so I don't know what they're going to look like when they come back. We'll see. I think it's been a tough year out there for not just for the bees and the beekeepers, but the almond growers too. They want to have good
oh
weather
yeah,
too, and it's been just a really difficult season. Of course, Jose could speak better to that, but sometimes it goes like that. Down here we're ahead, and out there they're probably a little behind. I don't know. Up there
yeah,
north, I know some areas of the north it's really cold still, and they're still trying to dig out of snow. I know, like in Utah, they've had a lot of big snowstorms and stuff the last couple of
hmm,
weeks. They've got a lot of snow out there, which they need actually, and so it's not a bad thing. But it's just so interesting to see how different areas of the country and world, how different they are from what we're doing here. It's just kind of cool to see
yeah,
that. But it's so for those of you who watch my videos and see me making splits in late February, early March, just realize that it's the South, and we're well into it now. But an early spring also has its own challenges and things we have to deal with too. We do risk starvation if we have a quick dearth or a quick cold snap that drops the blooms off the trees, and it can happen. There's all kinds of things to deal with as well, but spring's around the corner for everybody, so I think it's getting close. I think most people can taste it. Let's hope it comes as quick as you guys need it to up north to be able to get in your bees again and have a good time. So anyway, Brian,
yeah.
what do you think? What do you think, man? Are we
What do you want to do? You want to
anything
wrap it
else
up?
we need? Yeah, why don't we wrap it up, man? I think Paul was the star, and he came on, and great
10 to
information,
12.
and this has
Yeah.
been a lot of fun. But next week, I guess it'll be on my channel, correct? On Bruce's Bees here.
Yep.
And we're probably going to talk about that topic that was the topic of last week. I guess, what was it, Brian? The comparisons or some
Yeah.
management between hobby,
Hobbyist,
sideliners, and commercial.
sideliner, and commercial.
And we may talk a little bit too about the progression between the different ones and what they mean, define some of those things.
Yep.
And so I know we talk a lot about it on here, but we're going to really kind of emphasize and focus the different strategies that are utilized by different types of beekeepers. And obviously we hope you guys will all join us and tell everybody about us. And I think it's going to be a really good one for any beekeeper to watch at any level you're at, to kind of see, first of all, what someone at your stage is doing, and maybe see kind of what, maybe catch a glimpse of to where you can go with your operation if you want to do that. So
yeah,
Brian, we'll turn it over to you, man. Appreciate you having me on tonight.
Yeah, no, it was
a good
awesome.
time.
It was it was great having Paul join in. I can't do the phrase like what Greg says, so I'm not even going to try and do it. But I'll just thank everybody for tuning in. I mean, you guys are just always awesome. It's been well over a year now that we've been doing this, and like Bruce said, I mean, we're trying to continue along and just keep up with the great content. So we will see you guys next week, though. And like Bruce said, it'll be the discussing the hobbyist, the sideliner, and the commercial aspect of things. So until the next time, everybody, you guys have a fantastic weekend, and look forward to seeing you all next week. So take care, everybody.